If you can't use holiness to get rid of them, maybe it's time to use mob rule. I'm Pastor John from Living Stones and Sunland Seventh-day Adventist Churches. We're going through the book of Acts, and it is time for the call to prayer. Last week we began with holy economics. We continue with it now, but with the mob rule part of holy economics. As you know, Demetrius had who was a metal worker, of course, in Ephesus, and Ephesus was a strong place of early Christianity with Paul and Silas. If you'll remember, Paul and Silas were released from a prison by an earthquake. Remember that? And even the person in charge of the prison cell and all those around came to Jesus. It was a strong place. Difficulty brings about great things. But the only thing is when great things happen, then there is one who gets very angry. Satan himself does not want the message of God to move forward. And business is the great way to deal with it. I know we oftentimes look at business as only on the right, but it's on the left as well. You'll find a lot of science right now. You're going to find a lot of argumentation, all to make sure that people buy idols. We human beings are pretty good at coming up with ways to make sure that everything we do is holy. And that if only you buy my snake oil, then you will be healthy. We don't want all of Asia to go into uproar, as Demetrius says. We got to make sure that the goddess Artemis is blessed, and therefore she listens to our prayers and blesses Ephesus, as well as all the other provinces of Asia. After all, Artemis, the temple of Artemis, came down out of heaven and landed here on earth in Ephesus. And this is our claim to fame. That's why we sell all our trinkets. That's why we sell all of our little idols. Everybody's got an idol, don't they? We all have our little items that we want to sell to the world. And holiness is the best way into it. The gods, or even God. For later on, in the Holy Roman Empire, Christianity even became tainted in this way during the Dark Ages and even to today, using holiness for sales. Jesus cleared the temple, if you remember. In Matthew, he cleansed the temple, and in Luke and in Mark and in John, he cleansed the temple. And he said, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have turned it into a den of thieves." In other words, they were using the gospel or using the Bible as a money-making scheme. So in the same way, Demetrius was using religion as a money-making scheme. Everyone knows how to scheme. And let's read here. It's in Acts chapter 19. We'll continue with this story. Right after we get to verse 27, let's start at Acts 19, verse 27. "There is danger not only that our trade will lose its good name," Demetrius says to all the metal workers and all those who are the salesmen on the streets, "but also that of the temple of the great goddess Artemis will be discredited. And the goddess herself, who is worshipped all throughout the province of Asia and the world, will be robbed of her divine majesty." When they heard this, they were furious. They began shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." Soon the whole city was in an uproar. People seized Gaius and Aristarchus. They were pulled out. They were companions of Paul's. Fortunately enough, Paul was not there at that moment, so he was not dragged. Don't worry, he will have his time to be dragged, for he's heading to Jerusalem very soon. We're getting to a very difficult time in Paul's life. A time when the gospel is spreading doing incredible. And that's the time when the devil attacks. Every time. You find it even in our lives. When the church starts going well, you'll have some problems that come up that will kind of hurt things sometimes. But they don't hurt. Actually, God uses them to his honor, glory, for more growth, to get over the next hump. But it means that those of us who are on the side of God must push harder, pushing that log up over the mountaintop until it can roll down the other side. You'll find this time when family members will become hurt. Those will go to the hospital. Maybe even like my son will experience things that are bad. But you cannot let it stop your mission. Just like Paul would not let it stop the mission. These guys, Gaius, Aristarchus, they were ripped out and thrown into the main area there with a whole bunch of yelling people. Now, this is the mob rule. This is the part that Western civilization tries to get away from. Rome, Greece always tried to get away from mob rule, but boy, it comes back quick. And you know, mob rule is very easy when there's a lot of low information. You'll notice here they use science also. I'll get to that. It's great. Mob rule is when the brain turns off and everyone's doing it. And we're all believing it. So this is the way it's going to be. We all have to do this. And if you don't do it, then you're on the outside. And you're on the we're on the inside. You're on the outside. French Revolution was like that. And also, even our culture. During the time of the coronavirus, many of us got like this. It's bad when mobs begin to rule. Our society is slipping into this, just like in Ephesus. But you know what? God can use this to his glory. For Ephesus became one of the strongest of the ancient churches. They are going to get even stronger where all of these problems happen. Let's continue to read, though. So the assembly was thrown into confusion. Verse 30, Paul wanted to appear before the crowd, but his disciples would not let him. They held him back. Don't go there, you're going to die. And Paul sent then a message begging him not to venture into the theater. They dragged them into a theater. And by the way, that's like an amphitheater, kind of like a soccer stadium. You know, whenever a coup d'etat happens in a country, the soccer stadiums are usually where the atrocities happen. So in the same way, the theater is a place where the atrocity was about to happen. The assembly was in confusion. Some were shouting one thing, some shouting another. Most of the people did not even know why they were there. The Jews in the crowd then pushed Alexander into the front, and they shouted instructions to him. He motioned for silence in order so that he may speak. But when they realized he was a Jew, all of the Ephesian Greeks started shouting even louder for 2 hours. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. The city clerk finally got up there and he quieted the large crowd in the city as the riot was happening. Fellow Ephesians, doesn't all of the world know that the city of Ephesus is the guardian of the temple of Artemis and of her image, which fell from heaven? Here's the science part. Isn't it interesting? The mob rule comes up with a grand plan of blaming Paul for turning the world upside down, all because Demetrius wants more money and is sick and tired of trying to sell images to people who won't buy them because Paul is saying that images don't mean anything. How do you like that? That train of thought that happened. Isn't it incredible how the wish for money becomes then a riot? And now the city clerk has to get up and he starts giving a scientific explanation of how Artemis's image fell from heaven. And that's why she has such great majesty in Ephesus. But he uses this to his advantage and to the advantage of those early Christians. I think, you know what my suspicion is? The city clerk might know of Jesus. He decided, he said, you know, all know this. We all know this. Everyone knows this, that it fell from heaven. But then he himself begins to defend, not defend them, but kind of find a way around this argument. Let's listen. And as I read this, I want you to remember that in end times, as we're coming up to end times, it is our connections with the world, us Christians, us Seventh-day Adventist Christians, it is our connections with people of the world, them knowing that we're good people and we're not crazy, knowing that we are good people of a living God. It will be those connections that allow us to be able to survive these times, just like in the time of Paul. Some of us may be thrown in prison. Some of us may have issues in our lives, but there will always be a remnant kept, as those who are in the world sometimes defend us. Even if they maybe don't completely believe, they defend those who are on the side of God. We found this all through history. Let's keep reading. So he says, we all know that this happened. So we don't do anything. These facts are undeniable, he said, the scientific mind. These facts are undeniable. You ought to calm down and not do anything rash. Verse 37, you have brought these men here, though they have neither robbed temples nor blasphemed our goddess. If then Demetrius and his fellow craftsmen have agreed against anyone, notice he doesn't say the Christians, against anyone, the courts are open for these, and there are proconsuls, there are judges. They can press charges. And if there is anything further you want to bring up, it must be settled in a legal assembly. As it is, we are in danger of being charged with rioting because of what is happening on this day. In that case, we would not be able to account for this commendation, since there is no reason for it. After he had said this, he then dismissed the assembly. Basically what he's saying is, this riot's no good. We have a legal system. That was, you remember during the time of the riots in our country, not many people were talking about the legal system much. It was just about rioting, mob rule. But this guy says, we have a legal system. If you have a problem, Demetrius, with Paul or anyone else, bring charges against them. If they've robbed you, if they've done anything. But if they're just talking, speaking, there's freedom of speech. They can speak. But Demetrius, stop with your mob rule just because your shekels in your pocket aren't as much as you want. Holy economics ends there. When I say holy, I say holy economics. My friends, there are many who come up with many different reasons why we should shut other people up and shut them down and quiet them down. Sometimes we want to quiet others down. Instead of that, it's time for us, rather than raising our volume, reinforce our arguments for Jesus. Reinforce that it is only gold and silver that Demetrius makes. It is not a God. There will always be good that will help us through this process. Paul now pivots toward Jerusalem. But what I find in this is, even if the mob wants to rule, if you have wisdom and you stick with Jesus, you do what's right, people will come to defend you. Praise the Lord for that. I enjoy being with you. Right now I'm videotaping a day beforehand on Monday evening because tomorrow is James's surgery and I'll be at UCLA at the time of the call to prayer. But we're going to pray together in the next few minutes, in 15 minutes. Remember, smash that like button, subscribe, share this. Let's get the word out. Become an evangelist, even if you just use your phone. May God bless you all, and I'll see you in intercession, 7:15. Bye-bye.